Since this is the first anniversary, in retrospect of this first year, have you met the goals that the RNC set for itself?
I think we've most likely gone beyond even the most wild expectation. I think when we began about 1 year ago, we didn't know that the message that RNC has been trying to spread would be well received by many Rwandans, and so to a large extent we're very, very happy that the message has been well received.
And how do you measure that it's been well received?
It's been well received because I think in terms of it's been an extremely hectic year. We've literally gone, whether it's here in the United States or Canada or Europe or Africa. Of course, we don't have a way to gauge what is going on within Rwanda itself, because Rwanda is engulfed in this massive fear on everyone. But for the other places we've been to, you probably have been following this as well. There has been overwhelming response to RNC's message, and so we gauge it in terms of how many people have turned up to our meetings, who have turned up to our demonstrations, who have joined RNC, and so all these things really point to the fact that the message, difficult as it is, has been well received by many Rwandans.
Okay.
Yeah.
In speaking with Rwandans through your meetings, are there common themes that have come forth for what changes they want in Rwanda, and how do those line up with the goals of the RNC?
The common themes that run through all these meetings and our conversations have been issues that really confront Rwanda today, such issues like the issue of lack of fundamental freedoms and liberties, issues of extensive and deep abuse of human rights, especially the right to life, because as many people have mentioned, Rwanda is one of the very few remaining places on this planet where people disappear, where people are killed within country, and when they flee the country, they're hunted down in exile. It's a place where journalists and human rights activists and opposition leaders are jailed or killed or intimidated into exile and hunted down in exile to be killed. Rwanda is a place that still has lots of people living outside as refugees. And of course within the country is immensely fearful. Everyone is fearful, and we are still a deeply divided and traumatized society. So when all these things you put them together, these are the kind of things that are on the minds of many Rwandans that we've met. And of course, when we've gone to these places, the recurring theme has been our own history. History in Rwanda is still very, how do I say it? Different people look at our history in a different way. And so the recurrent theme of what happened in 1959, what happened in 1990, and of course for some of us who've been in the RPF, which RPF won the civil war in 1990 and came to power, and then committed some serious human rights abuses, the recurrent theme whenever we've gone to these meetings has been to ask us individually, especially for us, myself, Gahima, Kayum and Karegeya, they've always asked us, so what was your role in these human rights abuses? And of course, the whole theme of truth-telling, which is a very sensitive and yet very important subject in Rwanda. So these have been mostly asked about and most talked about themes in our conversations with Rwandans.
How do you handle those questions when people ask you specifically your role in human rights abuses while you were part of the regime?
Yeah, I'm sure, Jennifer, you've been following what I've been saying. For me and my colleagues, the most important way to approach it is to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I think we've probably come out as, Rwandans. I mean, within RNC, we've championed this whole issue of saying that unless we come out telling the truth, then it will be very difficult to be taken serious, because then people begin to feel that you are covering up like all the others before us or others around us.
Sure.
And so we've championed truth-telling and covering very difficult subjects and saying that ourselves who served in the RPF, we are more than happy to account for our sins of commission or omission, but would also encourage others, because all these things did not start with RPF. There's a long history in Rwanda of dictatorship and human rights abuses, and so it's very important not to see just the matter being former members of RPF accounting. It's, I think, all of us Rwandans, Hutus and Tutsis, looking at our past.
Yes.
And however uncomfortable it is, knowing that, the Hutus and Tutsis, Rwandans in general, in our own past, there are things we didn't do, there are things that we did not do well, there are bad things that we did. So we've got to come to terms with it in a transparent way, in a truthful way, and that way we can build the foundation for true reconciliation and healing in our country.
Okay. I think one of the things that seems to make reform so challenging in Rwanda is that much of the population is rural.
Yes.
And part of the service economy that has emerged since the end of the genocide. So how does the RNC plan to bring these rural players into the social construct as the basis of any legitimate government?
That's really the biggest challenge we envisage as RNC, but it's also doable in the sense that we won't be the first one to attempt to bring peasants into the mainstream social, economic, and political dispensation. There are other societies in history and other societies worldwide that have attempted to do that. And I'm sure there are lessons to learn from it. And the way it should be done is that the whole thing must start with creating a social, economic, and political construct that is not simply the business of a narrow elite. An elite, whether it governs in the name of Tutsi, or an elite, whether it governs in the name of Hutu, or even an elite that might share power and claim to represent everyone, but remains a narrow elite at the top. So what RNC is saying is that it's not simply the sharing of power with keeping in mind the ethnic challenge or the regional challenge in Rwanda. It is really reconstructing power such that the majority of the people, the Hutus and Tutsis, can belong to this country and be involved in the social, economic, and political life of the country. And that is something that once you reconstruct power in that way, and make sure that everyone understands that power is there to serve the people, not to manipulate the people.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is to create the institutions that make sure that indeed this power within the country, whether it's at the level of the state or the level of business or the level of civil society or at the community level, is really all geared to serving all the people, the Hutus, the Tuas, and the Tutsis, and to serve the majority of the people. And the majority of the people are simply poor peasants. And so here it's more about talking about really reconstructing power bottom up, but also making sure that from the top to the bottom, that kind of construct is relevant to the aspirations of the people. Mm-hmm. And so it's something that is a big challenge, but it's doable because when we want to be the first ones to attempt to do something like that. Mm-hmm. But of course, Rwanda has unique characteristics, has its own unique history, has its own unique challenges, but there's a lot that we can learn from others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any particular names of leaders that the RNC would hope to have in place should they take power in Rwanda?
No, that's not even... number one, it's not relevant to the situation as we have it today. It's not even important. We are in a struggle, a very difficult struggle. We even don't know how long it takes. And the issue of choosing leaders ahead of time outside the participation of the people would be part of the problem that we will be recycling instead of solving.
Okay.
So I think what is important for us really to have as many people participate in this struggle, mm-hmm. To make sure that we uproot the roots of dictatorship and conflict and human rights abuses and monopoly of power in our country. Mm-hmm. And once we're in the country and people have the freedom to do whatever they want and to be able to organize independently without coercion from the state, once that we reach that stage, then the task will be for the people to elect their own leaders.
Okay.
So the leaders must emerge from the people, not the other way around, RNC imposing leaders on the country, as mm-hmm. RPF has done and previous parties have done.
Okay. In the 8 published strategies of the RNC that you've published so far, you talk a lot about mobilization and education of human rights within Rwanda for the Rwandan people. How do you see that happening? How do you mobilize within the country when being there is a threat to your life, being a part of the RNC? Anybody being a part of the RNC?
Or even being part of any opposition.
Yeah, true.
Or even being thought of being, even being imagined to be part of the opposition. That's it's extremely difficult. But once again, we are learning from what has happened in history, the history of dictatorships in the world. We learn from contemporary global situation, both in North Africa and the Middle East. It is true that challenging dictatorship is often a very brutal business, and many lives, in many instances, are lost. But that's always what happens. For now, even people could not imagine that within 12 months of RNC's existence, we still have a long way to go, but we've challenged the status quo, we've challenged Kagame mm-hmm. regime in a very fundamental way, mm-hmm. in that at least for Rwandans living outside, with time in the course of 12 months, in the beginning people even used to fear coming to our meetings. Mm-hmm. With time, they're able to come to our meetings. With time, they could come to demonstrations, and Kagame would be there, and his agents would be there. So people, number one, have become less and less fearful, at least for those who are outside. People have become more hopeful about the possibility for change, mm-hmm. and that they are going to be the agents of this change. And so the fact that it has happened outside Rwanda, I think, is a very good sign. In the coming months and years, of course, we shall focus how to take the mobilization to the country itself. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be very risky. But I think people are becoming bolder and bolder day by day. And so, yes, it's a challenge. It's going to be difficult. But the way of dictatorship is always in one direction. It's always towards the decline and eventual fall. And then people are going to be at the center of this struggle.
I think a lot of the key to what you just mentioned, in what we've seen in North Africa, in Egypt, in Tunisia, has been the mobilization of the youth. Do you have that? Have you seen that in the RNC meetings as well? That are youth responding to the message?
At this point, generally speaking, yes. Once again, it's in the diaspora, Rwandan diaspora. Generally, it's the younger generation who have responded to this message in Europe. But I would also say that we still have a lot of work to do in that field, because young people have also, they tend not to really get so much interested in politics as such. Young people, you've got to find a way of mobilizing them to do that around issues that interest them. Most young people were born, for people who are in their 20s, were born shortly before 94. Those who are 17 years old were born in 94. That's the courage going, young people. And so for that kind of generation, they don't quickly relate to Rwanda's past, its history, what happened in 1994 and thereafter. And sometimes when they have done, they react in two ways. One group would certainly tend to be very radical in terms of, if they are Hutu, they would be very, very radical, and saying how, they have been dispossessed, how they have been marginalized, how they have perished in the jungles of Congo, even in Rwanda, and now banished in exile and living as, second-class citizens in Rwanda. But the other side of it would be people who say, you know what, this whole business of Hutus and Tutsis and Rwandans killing each other, it's shameful, it has created a burden for Rwanda. I do not even want to have anything to do with Rwanda. So there are those who are like that. In between, there are those who because they are naive and they really don't understand, and the government has invested a lot of resources outside and within the country of telling them that Rwanda is a paradise.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's also that group. So to answer your question, really young people have responded really to the message of RNC positively, but we still have a long way to go, because the young generation, we need to do a lot of work in explaining, the nature of the regime, our past, but most important, our future, because young people are more interested in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. There seems to be a lot of that message of come home, where we are a paradise now. What is behind that message, do you think? I see that a lot in a lot of different forums. And
the come home message is a strategy by the Kagame regime, that by telling people to come to the country, and then you have this scripted narrative, you show them the things on the front desk. It's like going to the hotel and you simply, or a restaurant, and you see food being served, but you don't know what goes in the background in the kitchen. And so they hope that by taking people to Kigali, they show them the new buildings, they show them the palm trees lining the road from the airport and taking them on guided tours, showing them things that should be seen, that people will then accept that actually that is the Rwanda that they should be talking about. But Rwanda is beyond, the true Rwanda is beyond the appearance.
Yes.
Yes, so that is what sometimes it has not only charmed the Rwandans who might go back for short periods of time, it also charms foreigners whose own perception of Rwanda might be the capital city. They might never go beyond the capital city. And so this whole thing of saying, oh, come to Rwanda is very misguided and very erroneous, but for Kagame, a very strategic way of trying to hoodwink or to deceive Rwandans to accept that the Rwanda that appears to them, the Rwanda that they show to these short-time visitors is the true Rwanda, but beyond that, the true Rwanda is the Rwanda that is fearful, that Rwanda where citizens are hunted down and killed, where people are put in jail, where people are still refugees, where people have no liberty or freedom. That is the fundamental challenge.
Absolutely. With that culture of fear and impunity that is so pervasive throughout Rwanda as a country, how do you guys as a political group overcome that and have them trust you guys? Have you faced that? I mean, I know you've been talking around the country and other countries to share your message, but it seems that this culture of impunity is so deep and entrenched in the history of Rwanda that how does that be overcome to show people that there is liberty and freedom to be had?
I think, number one, it is very important to recognize that this is a long struggle and a difficult struggle, especially as you rightly put it, where there is no history of respecting the rights of the people. You have generations of Rwandans who actually probably may not even understand it that much. But guess what? The issue of impunity in Rwanda, the lessons of impunity have been brought to the minds of people, to the lives of people, to each one of us since 1959 up to right now, in every home, amongst families of Hutus and Tutsis and Twas at different periods of time. That it's not really a theoretical it's not theoretical stuff or academic stuff. People understand human rights, especially where the right to life has been abused so much and degraded so much, so that the value of life, valuing life in Rwanda has more or less lost meaning. And it's not ordinary people who've been at the source of this impunity. It's the elites in power, whether the Hutu or Tutsi, that have been at the heart of this impunity. And so, whereas it's a very difficult and long process, but I think people in Rwanda fully understand the trauma they have gone through. They understand that this has been going on for a long time. And in every meeting that we've had, you can see that people are asking the question, shall be there a time when I will not be hunted down and killed? When I won't be put in jail? When I won't be a refugee? When the state will become an instrument of the few to instill fear amongst the majority? You can see these are not academic issues. People have come to understand that we'll come to the lowest point in our history, and people are actually yearning for that time when at least people can live a decent and peaceful life in their own country. So yes, it's a very difficult thing, and it's going to be a long process, and especially building the right mindset. The right mindset that embraces these liberties and freedoms, but most importantly, building the institutions across the country at various levels of society, and this is not simply the business of the government or the state. It's also the whole society, and so building the kind of institutions that not only protect these rights, but promotes them as well. I think that's why I say it's going to be a long and difficult process, but people are yearning for it. And so if the state could be less of an instrument of coercion, but one that really champions all these liberties and freedoms, I think we'll be surprised that Rwandans are indeed very ready to enjoy their rights as anybody else on this planet. Yeah.
With the current election that we've seen in the Congo over the last week or 2 weeks or so, does the RNC have you guys taken a position on how to address the questions of the militias that are based in Eastern Congo but have links to Rwanda, such as the FDLR, the CNDP? Are there ways of addressing these groups peacefully?
Yes. Number one, we are the first, I guess, at least as far as I'm concerned, in contrast to Kagame's regime, which on the one hand always wants to do with the FDLR and all these other groups behind the scenes, and in a way of, as long as Kagame gets elements from the FDLR that will be used against the opposition, that's what he does. And number two, most of these militias in the Eastern Congo have actually been created by Kagame's regime itself, because it's through these groups that Kagame maintains a proxy presence in Eastern Congo, and through that proxy presence he's able to manipulate the political and economic situation in the Congo. Now for us, we are saying, RNC is saying that instead of simply dismissing the IFDR all the time conveniently a terrorist group or a group of genocidal elements, for us we say the members of FDR are Rwandans, and so to wish away the problem that does exist, that has existed for 17 years, is simply wishful thinking, because Kagame has tried to manipulate it, Kagame has tried to use it, especially internationally, by branding them terrorists. He thinks that he can get sympathies from the international community, but he has not been able to defeat them. And so for us, we say these are Rwandans, and we are at the appropriate time, we would be working with many other stakeholders within Rwanda itself, first and foremost, to see how to resolve that issue of rebellion that is in the Congo. But for now, you cannot resolve it because the whole country is in rebellion.
Yes.
RNC has decided not to take up arms. Rwandans within Rwanda have not yet taken up arms. But how will you end rebellion in Eastern Congo when actually the country is in a mood of rebellion?
Yes. So
we believe that there will come a point when we talk about such things like national dialogue and conditional non-national dialogue, when we talk about at some point setting up a transitional government to organize for genuine transition to democracy. All these are issues that we need to bring on the table and figure out how to resolve them peacefully. And so, yes, we think about FDLR and other groups are in Eastern Congo, but we differ in a very different way from Kagame, who thinks that he will either manipulate them or simply wish them away. This is a group of Rwandans, so the argument of calling them genocidals and terrorists, of course, is a manipulation by President Kagame, and it hasn't worked, and I don't think it would work.
Yeah. With in one of the recent publications that you've written, you just in the top 8 reforms that you want to see for Rwanda so far, you noted that Kagame has been resistant to all and every request for peace talks or transition talks. How do you envision a transitional government happening in Rwanda peacefully?